Good morning again, folks. Oh, good. It left itself. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and we're going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do the usual warning, and then, of course, the disclaimers. So, Dr. Matthew Israel is basically trying to systematically dismiss every single person who was a part of the MDRI report. He's doing so badly, and is in fact making a very strong case as to why the individuals who don't agree with aversive therapies are actually the better doctors. Finally admitting he says we have no data, but one of the individuals had data. So we're going to hear a bunch of bullshit. We're going to hear projection, amongst many other things. So just be prepared for the stupid. I'm going to take a draught of this. This is my calming tea. This is what gets me through the day, folks. I drink basically buckets of this all day. It's the only way I have to keep sane. Well, that and coffee. All right, so in the description box, you're going to find a link to the article that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read. It's written by NeuroClastic, a small non-for-profit started by autistics for autistics, wherein they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so-called behavior modification program, right? Matter of fact, the JRC doesn't want you to read this article so much, they have threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused, so you know the drill. Please read that article and share on all your social media. We also have linked in there NeuroClastic's public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding, folks, in case the JRC has the balls to see through with their threat. Also linked in there, the Ozarks First article in regards to the situation with Agape Boarding School, now known as Stone for Help Boarding School. This is a so-called Christian-themed boarding school based out of Stockton, Missouri that takes in so-called trouble male teens that has impending over 21 civil lawsuits, claims, and allegations leveled against it, all which has been substantiated by the hard evidence gathered by the Missouri Department of Social Services, including ER documents provided by the boys. These claims include the following: sodomy, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, child trafficking, starvation, and that's just for starters. You have one former staff member arrested by the FBI, another a doctor who's still on the premises, up on multiple, again, substantiated claims of sodomy, rape, and sexual assault of the boys there. You have a brand spanking new attorney general with an unhealthy obsession with drag queens. And so much so that he's more willing to go after them than he is after proven pedophiles. And you've got a governor, also drag queen obsessed, who apparently also feels offensive that you can see women's arms, who's obviously up on a power trip. And basically the GOP has turned this state into unadulterated hillbilly hell. So, folks, please share that article on all your social media. We also got the other pertinent links to the Stop Shocks campaign, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, or as I like to call it, over 40 years of receipts. Receipts, doctor. You know what those are? Means evidence. Hard evidence. Want to try that again, that this is all baseless? Because I got a website. You know, trial documents, ER documents, DESI reports, your own surveillance footage. I can go on. We also have linked in there Jennifer Masumpa's behavioral sheet of shockable offenses, a clip out of the 7-hour ordeal undergone by Andre McCollums back in 2002, the templates, and the ever-present self-explanatory change.org Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center petition, and Photobombing Cat. Photobombing Cat likes to photobomb and then lay there right in front of the computer. All right. Just a little levity before we have to break into the stupid. When we talk about the JRC, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you do have young children present, please, headphones. Highly advised. This channel is marked not for children for a reason. We use profanity and we speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, parental supervision should go without saying, All right, trigger warning. We are about to again descend into the mad ravings of the lunatic mind known as Dr. Matthew Israel. You're going to hear gaslighting, victim blaming, abuse and torture apologencia, prejudice, pseudoscience, lie after God. So many lies. I've caught this guy in so many lies, and we're barely halfway through yet. So, be prepared for the stupid, all right? Okay. So where we left off, Jan Nisbet. Remember, he tried to demonize her earlier because she has data and facts. The horror, right? Jan Nisbet, who also provided information for the report, is a past president of TASH, an organization that is publicly opposed to the use of adversives. Ms. Nisbet has testified for the Massachusetts bill to ban the use of adversives. I find it interesting that the doctor found nothing to demonize Jan with. You notice that, right? Has a lot to say about some of these other individuals, but Jan, he couldn't find shit on, could he? This woman actually provided accurate historical data, as well as present data on other programs who actually serve similar populations, no matter what Dr. Matthew Israel wants to tell you. He wants you to believe that he serves the worst of the worst. And I'm sorry, in a state as large as Massachusetts, in a country as large as ours, I'm afraid that's just not true, Doctor. There are millions of us all over the place. To sit there and try to say that you take on the worst cases, the numbers just don't work, do they? How about all the positive data on all the other programs out there that Dr. Matthew Israel never wants to show you? Nor does he want to deal in the very real medical reality that no one treatment program is going to work for everyone, any more than you should use chemotherapy both on a cancer patient and also to cure the common cold. It doesn't work that way. Medicine doesn't work that way. Not on any level, not even in this field. But let's continue to read this, shall we? Dr. Freda Brown is also named as a source of information for the report. As noted earlier, she was involved in convincing James Vella's mother to remove him from JRC and place him in a supported apartment in New York City, where no adversives would be used and where he would be cared for with only positive treatment procedures, a step that led to his premature death through self-abusive behaviors. Okay, I'm going to challenge you, Doctor. You said I wouldn't challenge you. You just don't know me, do you? I am going to ask you a question, Doctor, and I wonder if you could actually answer me honestly. What role do you think your school had to play in his death? You're all willing to point the fingers at us and make us the boogeyman, right? It's our fault. We took him from the life-saving treatment, and because of us, he's dead. Bullshit, Doctor. Bullshit. Tell me, Doctor, as someone who's supposed to have studied psychiatry and psychology, did it ever occur to you that post-traumatic stress disorder could have majorly factored in on this death? Did you ever think of that bizarre marriage that happens between mental health issues and an autism diagnosis? That this could have been the predominant trigger that led to the death? I'm going to say that you would say, no, how could that be? We didn't do anything wrong. As someone who survived abuse and is autistic and does have the diagnosis of post-traumatic distress disorder, allow me to educate you on the subject. PTSD, flashbacks, and the psychological damage done informs the autism and vice versa. In particular, you can have a horrific flashback. Very real. You know what that does, don't you? That it kicks into the autism, where we already have inherent triggers. And what does that trigger? I'm going to tell you what it triggered in me. All the worst parts of my diagnosis came out, including, doctor, self-harm. As a matter of fact, it still happens on occasion, where I've punched myself on the side of the head multiple times, gouged myself in my nails and my legs by just dragging them up my leg. Not so much the hairbrush these days, mainly because I get them from Dollar Tree and they're more likely to fall apart. But you see where I'm going with this, don't you, doctor? You took an individual who already had triggers from birth. You then tortured this individual horrifically for years. This individual, due to the efforts of those of us trying to save these kids from your psycho ass, were able to get them out successfully. Okay? But now that the fear was no longer preeminent, all that shit, like myself, that we were forced to backbite and force into the back of our heads to be able to function and survive. Now that the threat is gone, guess what happens? The door opens. Right? Now we have to process the horrific shit we've just been through, right? There's repercussions for that, doctor. It's called PTSD for a reason, doctor. Which means since one diagnosis informs the other, if, for example, like this young man, one of your main issues was extreme sensory issues, hence the whole gouging and scratching in the first place, what are you going to think happens when he is forced to basically try and confront what happened to him? What do you think is going to happen? Yeah. How is he any different from any veteran who, after a flashback, have also had self-abusive behaviors, some of which have led to their deaths? It isn't. You say that we don't want to accept responsibility, but the fact is, doctor, the truth is you don't want to accept the responsibility. That the psychological damage that you inflicted on this young man was the largest factor in his death. Not us, but you. You do not want to confront, nor will you speak with us on the damage that comes from the abuse and the torture you put these kids through. But let's read the rest of the paragraph, shall we? Dr. Brown's strong anti-aversive predilections were so obvious that the reporter from the New York Times who chronicled the story of James Vallows for the paper wrote the following. Miss Brown had ill-diagnosed contempt for aversives, and after visiting Mr. Vallows at JRC, she concluded he would blossom in the outside world. Again, you're blaming us. He wants you to blame us. He wants you to believe that he and his center is the only place in all the world that can treat these kids. It's a lie. A very provable one. Once again, Dr. Matthew Israel refuses to accept any responsibility that he has in the death of these kids. He wants it to blame it on us. We took them out. We got them off of the aversives. We put them in the outside world. And because of this, we're the bad guy. And this is not the first time the New York Times has demonized us. They do it on a semi-regular basis, after all. This is why I refuse to buy the New York Times and why I don't fucking trust the multimedia out there further than I can fucking throw them. Remember when I said JD versus AH was not my first rodeo when it comes to the corruptiveness of the fucking modern media? This is my case and point right here. The New York Times has never, ever held Dr. Matthew Israel to account to this very day. To this very day. You just have contempt for aversives, and you will not admit that there's benefits to it. There is no benefits to torture, doctor. None. 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 New York Times and other publications like it have been making millions of dollars right along with orgs like Autism Speaks off of the back of our suffering for more years than I care to count. It does not benefit or profit them in any way, shape, or form to actually treat us with any kind of form of dignity at all. They want to sell you an image of us completely run amok and out of control, because that's what puts money in bank accounts. Think the New York Times give a shit about the fact that they traumatized this young man? Caused PTSD? That he was far worse coming out than he ever was going in? No, they don't. The media doesn't care about facts these days. Matter of fact, they haven't cared about facts for a very long time. They care about who's lining their coffers. And if you think that Matthew Israel doesn't have friends in media, I got a river in Egypt I can sell you. But let's go into this, shall we? She has also testified against the use of aversives at JRC in one or more substituted judgment hearings. The hearings where the JRC seeks judicial permission on a case-by-case basis to employ aversives in the treatment programs of certain students. Dr. Brown has also testified in favor of the Massachusetts bill to ban the use of aversives because we know they don't work, doctor. Anymore back when days in school when they used to paddle, kids didn't work. Didn't stop them from drinking, didn't stop them from doing drugs, or doing anything else really. It only lasts as long as the fear element remains. Okay? When that fear is taken away, and then we are now forced to deal with all the emotions, the feelings, and the traumatization and the psychological destruction that has been reaped upon us. It's not a fucking easy thing to heal from, folks. This is coming from my own personal fucking experience here. It is not easy. And not many of us survive it. There is a reason why you don't see that many autistics be able to reach an age beyond around 45, 50. Okay? There's a solid reason for that. Those of us who reached my age are basically shocked to still be here, quite frankly. He's demonizing this doctor for a reason. He's demonizing us for a reason. And it's dollar bills. This doctor will never, ever, admit to the role that he played in the death of James Velez. He will never admit that the psychological damage that he did and intended to do to this individual. Remember, that's the mantra of ABA. First, you must break them, then rebuild them. Some of us don't handle being broken that well. Know what I'm saying? There's repercussions for that type of mentality. Being forced to be something that we're not day after day with no reasonable accommodations, no assistive devices. No, we're just act neurotypical even if we're not. Every day. Even when we're alone in our own homes. Because if we're not, then we just don't want to heal. We just don't want to get better. I've got your better. Okay? This is the shit every single one of us has to hear every goddamn day of our fucking lives. From shit-ass parents who make millions of dollars off of their kids' backs. I've seen it. Year after year after year. Trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder. When you already have a diagnosis that is known to produce behaviors when things are triggered. It does not surprise me that this happened to this young man. But I do not blame the advocates and the doctors who insisted on getting them out of that fucking torture hellhole. I put the blame on the doctor who tortured this man for years with impunity and got away with it. Who caused this individual mental health issues that were never there before he walked through those doors. I blame the man who made this kid scream and beg for mercy for an accident at birth. No, I do not blame those advocates. I do not believe in your argument, doctor, that had he been left on your fucking device, that he would have been perfectly fine. That is a lie. Okay? I'm not going to accept responsibility for something that I did not cause. We did not cause that to happen, doctor. You did. You did. Dr. Brown did not cause that young man's demise. You did. because you tortured and traumatized him and you refuse to recognize the fact that PTSD can be a killer. In particular, in the cases of those who have dual diagnoses, and those inform each other. When that happens, the less desirable traits of our diagnoses come out to haunt us. And things like this can happen. But that was not the advocates who wanted him free and safe, or the doctors who wanted the same's fault. It is the fault of the doctor who thought nothing of ripping apart this kid's psychology and tearing him into shreds and then torturing him and abusing him and starving him into compliance, causing a mental health issue known as post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a killer. We're to close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel, especially on this subject here. So please, if you could, don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and please hit those comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. As always, we hope you have a good one. I'm going to go clean now. Send help. Bye-bye, everyone.